Hi, my name is Madeline, and welcome to my loose watercolor moonlit evening landscape tutorial. I have my 100% cotton watercolor paper taped down to my table, and I'm grabbing a flat brush and some clean water, and I'm going to wet our paper. I also want to take this time to go over our supplies. You don't need the same colors that I do. You mainly just need shades of dark blue and dark green, but I do use Baltic Seaport English Ivy by Addison and Segwig. She's a handmade paint maker on Etsy, and some olive green by M. Graham. So I have my Paulina Bright round 2 brush, and I'm grabbing some Baltic Seaport, which is just a really dark blue. It's a little bit warmer than indigo. And so I'm making circular motions around the area that I want to paint my moon eventually. Because our paper is already wet, the colors are going to flow very nicely together. And so I'm continuing in just circular brush strokes so that the edges of the paper get a little bit darker, and we're going to try our best to leave the center where our moon is going to be on the lighter side so that we get that really nice glow. By having our paper already wet and sort of slowly building the darkness around the moon, it's going to create a really smooth sky with not that many brushstroke lines. Now I am going to grab some English ivy and slowly build up our foreground here, which is just going to be a pretty dark green field. A tip that would help is to not have too much water in your brush. So I'm gonna pick up a little bit of black just to get this a little bit darker. I my brush was a little bit too wet, and so it kind of made this area a little bit more washed out. So I'm going to wipe the edges, and I'm going to continue to build that color. And if this happens to you, that's okay. Just make sure that the top sky part is still wet as you are working on the foreground so that we don't get any hard blooms or lines at the point which they meet. I'm picking up some M. Graham olive green and a little bit more of the Baltic Seaport to darken the foreground. I'm going to pick up a little bit more Baltic Seaport and darken the edges at the top just one last time because I see that my paper is still wet, and so I just want to add more contrast. Now I want to add some shimmery highlights. So this is Schmink. It's their bronze powder in the bronze color. So I'm going to grab just a regular brush that I'm going to use to kind of drop some color into our foreground. And we want to make sure to do this when our paper is still wet so that it activates the powder and it actually sticks to the paper rather than just kind of brushing off after it's dried. I chose the bronze color because I want it to kind of feel like there's some fireflies in the foreground. And I like how that looks, so I dried that layer. Now moving on, I'm going to grab my metallic paints, and I'm going to grab a small round brush. This is a round 1. And with metallic paint, something to be mindful of is that you need to be really good about activating it before you put the actual paint on paper. So I am going to grab some water. I might need a little bit more, but let me show you what I'm talking about. So this is how we activate the paint. You just kind of go over the half pan several times like that, so that you really mix that color up. And I'm going to paint the moon right here, and it's just going to be a really tiny circle. And also, I apologize, I focused the camera on the paints and then I realized that I didn't refocus the camera back to my watercolor paper. So I'm going to try to go through this part a little bit faster so that you don't have to look at a blurry screen. So I have my liner here and I'm picking up more of the same paint that I used to paint the moon, and I'm just dropping some larger dots for some like brighter fireflies. And then now I'm going to grab my tree brush, which, as most of you guys know, is just an old round 2 brush that I've sort of smushed onto my palette, and it gives me really nice tree textures. I'm going to pick up some more English ivy, and I'm just going to loosely paint some trees in the horizon of our landscape. And it's going to be really loose, and I just sort of want them to feel like they're in the distance. I'm going to paint some more on the left side, and because I don't want my hand to kind of brush against the trees that I paint on the right, I'm going to use my left hand just to really loosely do the left side ones. Now I'm going to rinse my brush and grab a really watery mixture of that green, because right underneath that moonlight, I kind of want the trees to seem a little bit lighter because they're sort of getting hit by that moonlight. So this is a few shades lighter than the trees on the outside. I'm going to grab that same metallic paint that I used to paint the moon, and I'm going to drop just a few touches on the tops of those trees so that it looks like the moon is kind of reflecting off the treetops. And I really like how that looks, so I'm going to dry this layer. And then once it's dry, we can remove our masking tape. And this is our final landscape. I love the brightness of the moon. The subtle, shimmery, metallic paint just gives it that really magical evening feel. If you liked this tutorial, please hit the like button. It's a really small way to help my channel grow. And if you enjoy my content, use the following QR codes to either find me on Patreon or Instagram.